Welcome to the Enlighten Up podcast, where I am going to take you into a deep exploration of what it means to exist in this current reality. We are going to raise your vibes, open your mind, expand your heart, and dive deep into the wondrous mysteries and possibilities of this lifetime. There's been a spiritual catalyst that has set in motion the awakening process of many across the globe to return to the knowingness of self and unite what has been separated. Together, we're going to bring light into that darkness. We're going to remember the joy of living. But most of all, we're going to turn up the volume of our own eternal power and do the thing we're here to do. Hey everyone, I am excited to do a show with you today about coincidences. This is something that so many of us in the spiritual community are familiar with. We come across coincidences, or sometimes we like to look at it as divine intervention. But today, my guest is Bernard Beitman, who is a medical doctor, and he has his own podcast as well, Connecting with Coincidence, which I happened to be on a few months ago. And today he's coming on to discuss his book, Meaningful Coincidences: How and Why Synchronicity and Serendipity Happen. Bernie, welcome to my show. It's so good to have you here today.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back seeing you again. So it's really fun. It's really fun. So we'll have a good time today.
Yeah. And of course, I love the topic of your podcast. We talked a lot about different coincidences that came up, and it's just an interesting topic considering, the field you're in and the exploration that you've done through your book. What has been the feedback in your community around your book?
To an article in the Wall Street Journal and an article in the Los Angeles Times are suggestions that there's general interest in the public in meaningful coincidences. So that's one form of feedback. Another form of feedback is silence from my colleagues. I have a Psychology Today post, a blog, and I posted one titled Charlottesville, that's where I live, Charlottesville, Virginia. Charlottesville psychiatrists challenge the conventional view of reality. So that I didn't know was going to get any hits, particularly Psychology. So it started off really slowly, but lately it's been popping up. So it's at 2,000 now, which is more than I expected it to get, but it keeps going, and it's surprising that it keeps going on this way. And I sent it to a psychiatric listserv, a bunch of psychiatrists who read stuff about psychotherapy and medications and stuff. And I think that popped them up. Nobody's contacted me about it. There's another person whose book came out around the same time mine did in September of 2022, this a couple of months ago, who is a reformed neuroscientist. By that, I mean, she knew the brain created consciousness. And so they're looking for where in the brain consciousness came from, which nobody has yet. And I don't think they're going to find it. I don't think it's quite in there. There's something, the brain has something to do with it. So she was giving a talk at a neuroscience convention and said, I'm going to talk about weird stuff, because she wrote a book that she didn't want to write, because she kept having experiences in which conventional reality was not an explanation. And she's a neuroscientist studying the brain. So she had to go into telepathy and clairvoyance and past lives. And she saw too much evidence that some of these things are true. And it was painful. You can start reading the book, and I don't want to write this book, she's saying. I don't want to write this thing. It's just so painful, because I'm a dyed-in-the-wool neuroscientist, and I believe. It's a kind of religion.
Yeah, no, well, yes.
No, well, yes.
Exactly, exactly. There's a lot about science that definitely becomes much like a religion. And to be fair, the same happens with spirituality. I think that happens when we get too caught up in the dogma, or we get too caught up even in just our own beliefs of what we believe to be true in that moment and then become unwavering. And I think what is the most important aspect of this entire existence and journey is always maintaining room for being wrong or for your viewpoints or perceptions to be improved upon. And so many of us in our human nature, I should say our egoic nature, want to know we have it right the first time, or when we think everything looks like it's fitting, now I must have it right. Where you may have part of it right. You may have part of the story. There's so much out there. This universe is so expansive and constantly growing. And apparently it's a multiverse. So there's like a lot of them out there. I just don't know how we could ever think that we could fully understand the full truth of anything.
Agreed. And while your mind just went out to the expanding universe, and the fact that the expanding universe is expanding faster than the speed of light, so
Yeah.
we can't use our telescopes to see where it's going.
Uh-huh.
My interest is right here on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
If there's enough weird stuff happening right here to occupy a lot of curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to start thinking that maybe reality isn't quite the way we think it is, and your perspective about being open to changing your beliefs is hard for a lot of people to do, as you're talking about. They'd rather stay with their fixed belief. And you are in a business where you have to keep changing what you think because you're continuing to find out what's new, what you didn't know before. And that's what I'm doing. Psychiatry is supposed to be that.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be coming up with new stuff, but it's still within a box. And
Yes.
and I'm challenging that box.
So, and I appreciate you for challenging that box. I think it's a box that has been quite boxed in for a long time. I'm curious though, what is your perception, and maybe perhaps the perception of some people around you, colleagues, of this idea of the expanding awareness of the field around us and how it relates to or interacts with our own fields? Do you see a trend or a movement that is starting to become more open-minded than so rigid in what the areas that you've been taught in medically are really, and scientifically, are trying to keep the thought form in?
That's one of those questions, Nicole, where we both know the answer because you're seeing it and
I want to hear you say it though. I want to hear you say it.
Of course, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing with people like you, who are drawing a lot of people to yourself because you're willing to look at reality in a different way than the the basic mind brain materialistic view of things. So you're doing that. You've had experiences, as I have had, that are pretty weird, that make you say, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Your trouble and my trouble, which isn't trouble, but we cause trouble, is curiosity. Why did that happen? And the willingness to start changing. So when I talked about 3 psychiatrists in Charlottesville challenging conventional views of reality, that's me about synchronicity. It's another about near-death experiences, and another about reincarnation. And we're all 3 in Charlottesville, where some bad things happen also. My view, which I think is starting to get to what you're talking about, is that our minds are much more connected to our environment, much more embedded in our environment than we like to think. That we tend to think that our minds are separate, and there were islands separate from what's around us. Not true. And coincidences between what I'm thinking And what happens out there is like suggesting that our minds are much more interconnected than we think.
Mm.
These are explained by probability. There are people have to take into consideration that coincidences all have a probability. The statisticians like to say it's all probability. And then the people who are in the divine intervention thing, it's all God or the universe that's doing it. I'm saying, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we have something to do with it too.
Mm-hmm.
So there is probability, randomness, there is mystery, and there's us, and that we have something to do with them. I was in Denver a couple of months ago, and my son had arranged for me to meet with him and my other son and one of their friends at a restaurant in Denver, and it was a nice place. We had a good time. So then there was somebody else I was going to have dinner with the next night, and I guess there's only one restaurant in Denver.
Okay, so for the audience to know, I was the person who Bernie met up with. He happened to be in Denver, and I was just on his podcast, and he wanted to meet up for dinner. And so he's like, "You pick the restaurant." And so I thought, okay, what do you like? And you prefer vegetarian if you can, but and I like the opposite of vegetarian. And so I was like, okay, let me find something that's really good and that I think that you would like. And so I chose the restaurant, and it turned out to be the same restaurant that your sons took you to the night before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
so we did a really good job of showing you the variety of Denver.
You did. You did. And the nice thing about it, the restaurant was within walking distance from where I was staying.
Yes.
So,
which I did not know. I did not know where you were staying.
You had no idea.
Yeah.
And it turned out that you lived a mile from where my son was living, across the lake. He lived on one side of the lake, you lived on the other side of the lake. Yeah. I didn't know that either. Right? Those are fun kinds of coincidences. And we had a couple of others when you were on my podcast, which we could talk about. But what I learned from you, as I ask you about what is the meaning of this, when I look at coincidences, there are two forms of meaning that are primary. One is like, what does it mean to me now and into my future? And how do I explain it? Those are two forms of meaning. So I asked you, what does this mean to you? And you said, kismet, just enjoy it for the moment. And I thought that was a wonderful thing for me. I needed to hear that because all we have is now. And sometimes there's now. I don't know if I'll ever talk to you again. So I'm going to, so this is a now that we're having a kind of a repeat of. And it's enjoyable. We've had a good time each time we've talked with each other, but that's it. It's just the now of now, and just enjoy it for what it is. So I like that you were able to teach me that by your response, because it's a good way of thinking about the meaning of some coincidences. So that's what the double restaurant thing kind of led me to, as well as some other coincidences that you and I had together, just for the moment, and it's wonderful.
Yeah,
it's a great thing.
I think sometimes we also want to complicate, or we want to look for the deepest meaning possible, and sometimes it's not necessary.
Sometimes it really makes you crazy too.
Yeah, it does make you crazy. It does make you crazy. So this is wonderful that you've written a book about it. And, one of the things that I'd like to ask you about in this is coincidence sensitivity. You write about this in your book, and how like some people are really tuned in to these signs, right? These meaningful coincidences that happen in our lives. And some people are on the opposite spectrum, completely oblivious, unless it's smack dab in their face, and almost hitting them over the head, like with a 2x4. What controls the sensitivity towards coincidences? What are the factors around that?
Well, if you get hit on the head with one, you kind of start paying attention.
Yes.
And I've gotten hit on the head by a couple of them. So that caught my attention. So you become more interested in believing that coincidences happen.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think there is any meaning in the universe, then that's what you'll find. So that when a weird thing happens, two incidents of a coincidence come together in a surprising and unexpected way, you'll say, "Oh, I just was talking to somebody who tells people she knows about her coincidence, and they say, so what?" That's a view of coincidences is not going to increase the likelihood of you're seeing coincidences. It's a desensitized view of coincidence, a random view of coincidences. So if you believe that there are potentially useful, interesting, or even just fun, because they're fun. I mean, some of them are just.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I go, "Hey, are you kidding me? You messing with me again, setting this one up for me? I mean, what's going on here?" You begin to think that we are in a simulation or somebody's running the thing. There's an idea of a Earth coincidence control office that somebody came up with.
Yeah. I'm sure there's something like that actually in existence in people's realities. But it's true. I think your beliefs shape your reality. And whatever you believe, that's why your belief systems are so important. And that's why it's so important to stay open to the idea that your beliefs may need some improvement or some shifting, transformation. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but you want to always leave some room open for that. And trust me, as a type A, Taurus, stubborn, likes to dig my heels in, I can tell you I've struggled with that one my entire life. But as I've been getting older, I've been getting more and more adept to understanding that I need to be a lot more flexible in my perceptions and my belief systems.
And it comes with some pain, I believe, Nicole.
It comes with a lot of pain. It comes with a lot of pain.
Keep in mind as we talk that I'm a Pisces, and the fluidity of beliefs is part of the whole thing. So I know what a Taurus feels like. I have my Mars in Taurus, so it's like I got a bit of that. But I can just, even the way you were just telling me, it's like I know I gotta have it.
I grew up being the person who never liked to admit that I was wrong. And now, I still struggle with it a little bit, but nowhere near as much. I'm a lot more easily able to say, yeah, I got that one wrong. But it's still painful. It still doesn't feel good when it happens. But I wanted to say, let's just start off with something fun here. Because I had an interesting couple of meaningful coincidences maybe happen, or signs. I don't know what you want to call them. We'll get, since you're the author of this book, you're the authority on coincidences right now. My audience does not know about this, depending on when this episode comes out, because I've got quite a few in the lineup already. But for those of you who haven't heard, the other night I was coming home from having drinks, and it was a very easy night at a very nice bar, sitting at the bar, not crowded. Everyone had their own seat, so no one was bumping into me or anything like that. And as I was getting undressed to get ready for bed, I took off my jeans and I looked, something fell on the floor. And what fell on the floor was this folded up dollar bill that I am showing the audience right now. And if you're watching on Spotify, you can also see this, YouTube and Spotify. And I thought, well, that's strange. I haven't carried cash on me in months. And no less a dollar bill, right? So I was like, where did this come from? Because I really haven't had cash in like a really long time. And of course, the jeans I was wearing, I wear them often. They've been washed often. And so I opened the dollar bill, and inside, in the fold, is this yellow ticket that says premium on it with some numbers. It looks like a really kind of cheaply made drink ticket. I don't know where that came from because I've never seen the ticket before in my life. And I thought about the only event I've ever been to where there was a need for a drink ticket, the drink tickets were red. And it was a cashless event. So everything was done digitally. So I'm like, okay, that's strange. So I put the dollar bill on my desk here. And I decide, I'm like, let me just get into bed and watch a TV show before I like go to sleep. And as I'm like thinking about this, but also watching the TV show, all of a sudden I hear Christmas bells jingling. And I'm looking at my computer screen and I'm like, is that coming from my computer? And so I stopped. I could still hear the bells. So then I stopped the show I was watching. I rewound it, re-listened to the spot I heard the Christmas bells jingling. Nothing. So I'm like, okay, there is a sound that came from somewhere else other than this physical reality that wanted me to hear jingle bells. Like when I say jingle, I don't mean the song Jingle Bells, but it was Christmas bells that literally that's what I heard. And it was about 5 to 10 seconds long. It wasn't just a split second sound. Now, to make it very clear, I do not get audible psychic sound. Like my psychic intuitiveness comes from a feeling and a knowing, and sometimes from just telepathic downloads. Like I just all of a sudden I almost can see the message, or I know it, like I can read it. It's in my mind, drop there. So this is a very new thing for me. So I thought, okay, this I have to pay attention to because this does not happen often at all. So I'm looking at this dollar bill on my desk, and I think, okay, so what is this trying to tell me? What is the universe trying to tell me? Is it trying to tell me that I've got some money coming in like around Christmas time, or is there a premium gift coming my way at Christmas time? And then I looked at the way the dollar bill was sitting on my desk, and this is the way it was sitting. And I didn't make it look this way. This is just the way it sat. And as I was thinking this, I looked, and I'm going to show you the way it came to me. What do you see? What do you read? What does it say at the top there?
The one.
Exactly. So I was like, is the one coming at Christmas time? Like, what is the one? What does the one mean? So tell me, Bernie, what is your analysis of this interesting set of meaningful coincidences?
It's quite a story. If taking it apart a little bit, because we don't know where the dollar bill came from, nor where the premium. I was wondering when you showed that premium, it looked like it had some numbers at the bottom.
Yes, it does. Do you want me to read them to you?
Yeah, let's just see what they are.
2751669. Mm-hmm. 2751669.
Mm-hmm. We have to get for this one a little more abstract, which you are able to do.
Well, you know I love the abstract. I am a woman.
You're a tough woman. You got Taurus and you got macho in you, and we both know that. So let's get abstract, just for whatever predispositions you and I have. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Because we can't answer this one in the regular way of thinking about coincidences. The key thing here is that you think there's something here. I mean, that's why you're showing it to us, to me and your audience. You're saying, this is weird, and I wonder if what it's saying to me, I believe that's what you're saying, about me now or me into the future. That's what we mean by meaning, as well as what caused it. But that's another explanation, another way of thinking about meaning. So let's assume, for the purpose of our fun and abstraction, that maybe some coincidences are semiotic or symbolic ways of communicating to us from some other dimension.
Yep.
And that's easy for you to accept, I think.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much. I mean,
and pretty much everyone in my audience.
pretty much every. Well, it's
Yeah.
not the conventional view of coincidences. I mean, I like being able to think of the symbolic nature of coincidences, that it's a language, and that we're going to have to get to a place where we're not using words all the time, so
Mhm.
that you and I can be sitting across from each other and have visions of images of what I want to communicate to you, and you can have images of what you want to communicate to me, and we don't need many words for that.
Yeah.
The words and the talking only become a kind of conveyor belt to help augment the vision that you have to communicate to me, or the vision that I have to communicate with you. You
Yes.
climb up, I climb up, you climb up, we get into your mind.
Mhm.
But we have to do words now. That's what we've got. But here you've got some potential symbols that could be telling you something. Now you want to, your interpretations were money at Christmas at first, or I'll say money jingling in your pocket. You don't do coins either. You could just play around with that.
Yeah.
But the key elements of this coincidences is hearing a jingling Christmas song that came out of no place.
They were just jingling Christmas bells. It wasn't an actual song.
Jingling Christmas bells.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like maybe would be on a sleigh ride in some
Yes.
some northern Canadian
Yeah,
place,
something like
maybe
that. Yeah.
something like that, with the horse and the thing,
Yes.
something like that. North of Toronto. So anyways, someplace north where it's cold, and there would be sleigh bells ring. Are you listening?
Yes.
That kind of jingling. Okay.
Yes.
So that's weirdness number one. Because it came out of nowhere. You don't hear
Yes.
auditory, but it
Don't.
just happens that I did a webcast the other day, yesterday, and somebody reinforced what I did a post in Psychology Today about, is that we do hear voices.
Mm.
And we can hear voices talking to us and guiding to us. But being as it's you, it was music as a sound. I won't say music, it was a sound that you heard. That's a form of symbolism as well. Okay. So jingle, and I made associations. You would have to make the associations. I did one that probably might fit for you from where you maybe heard them before. So jingling from no place, but maybe reminding you of the past, is the one weird thing. And the other weird thing is the way it landed on your dresser, that that one, the one.
Mm-hmm.
Just look how sensitive you are to looking for symbols in your environment. I mean, that's you first,
Mm-hmm.
that you would see the one, and not pay attention to the drink thing or the numbers, but the things that stand out to you. It's kind of like analyzing a dream, or the jingle, because it is a dream. If you excuse me just for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a dream like experience, I can say. And the key things from, again, when you ask people about their dreams, you ask, what are the symbols that stand out most to you? And what I'm hearing, and you need to confirm this, is jingles, and the one. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. And the word premium also stuck out to me.
And the word premium is kind of a link between jingle and the one, because it was on the, so we'll call it a link, at least those three things.
Okay.
So this kind of an analysis now gets us to where then I put this back on you,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can respond, where what does it bring to your mind? And you don't have to have one of your Taurus certainty answers for this. It would be good for you just to associate to it, just to see what comes up. What do you think of when you say the one, jingle, and premium all in one thing, or jingle, premium, and the one, which is the sequence you gave?
Two things. The first thing is like a partner. And the second one is like a dream come true when it comes to business, like business opportunity.
For us who don't understand the telegram you just delivered, would you elaborate a little bit?
Okay, well, the partner I think is pretty self-explanatory, no?
Oh yeah, but it doesn't. I don't know how you get the partner from
The
the.
one,
Oh, the one
the
for
one,
you, for
yeah, the
you.
one for me, like the one I've been searching for, the one, and premium meaning like top notch. The one you've been working hard, like just premium working on yourself to also have that reflected back to you in a partner. And then the jingle bells to me was like it's your gift, like this is your blessing, because I think about Christmas time. So that was the way my mind interpreted the signs, the messages that I was receiving. But then I also, because I also know that there's another aspect going on within my life right now, in that I've got some incredible business opportunities. And I would say that it felt like perhaps around Christmas time, there would be an opportunity, a very good opportunity, like premium, that would come in, that would allow me to really kind of, because when the money to me represents abundance, and that's how I saw like a business expansion opportunity. But that's what's going on in my life. So that's what my mind would be drawn to.
Absolutely, that's what
Mm-hmm.
we do.
Mm-hmm.
What what is this saying about me now? That's why um, I was happy to hear. Sometimes it's just the fun of now, and that's it. It doesn't have a future orientation.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, this there are two futures here. Uh, is partner wise? Is there a partner there that is the one now? That's the premium.
I would say that potential is around in my field for sure.
Okay, so it's a potential future that looks pretty good, is what I just heard.
It's a possibility.
It's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the same thing is the possibility with your business. And you have some good possibilities you mentioned to me that in business too. So in your field, there are two possibilities, partner wise and business wise, that you knew before you saw the dollar bill and the premium on there. So you are taking those dollar bill, premium, jingle, present of business and partner, as saying it's confirming what you're hoping will happen and seems to be in the process of happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's saying, yes, these are things that are happening to Nicole and to me, you, Nicole, and this is confirmation that I'm doing the right thing now.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Um, when we talk about coincidence sensitivity,
Mm-hmm.
this is being really sensitive, because what you did was search your environment for clues that reflect what's going on in your mind and hopefully in your future.
Now, when you say that, I think it's important for us to let the audience know what you mean is I was almost unconsciously or subconsciously searching my environment for clues. Correct? Or am I wrong?
Oh, good. I'm glad you do that, because I do that a lot myself. And I like feeling it on the other side, because I do that a lot. I want you to know, says Nicole. Yes, what you have done is what happens to happen with coincidences is you got to have in your subconscious, you got to have this little coincidence sensitivity button
Mhm.
that is kind of like going, and then it goes pop when one happens. It kind of then pops into your consciousness to look at it. And I strongly agree with you. And I'm glad the way you say that. It's got to be in you to be able to see it. But you
Yes.
can't be searching rationally all the time, because you know, as well as I do, that we can't rely only on rationality. We have to rely on our intuitive capacities. Which brings me to one of our coincidences that I had about you. And I think it's so funny because it was another abstract one. This is very abstract. I don't get people telling me a story like this, where it's the juxtaposition of the folds in the dollar bill and you see the one. I mean, that's not the usual way people come up with stuff. They got to be hitting the head with it a little bit more. So
I've been trained well.
By what?
by my guides. I don't know, my higher self. Start looking. I started paying attention more, and it's just, you get your master's degree in this kind of stuff after a while.
Well, I'd like to talk after I do this part of it about the higher self, because
Okay.
the higher self is really, really important in being able to explain how some of this stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think each of us has one, and what we want to do is get into a conversation with our higher self so we can be able to communicate with that higher self.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll just keep going with that because, well, the side part of this is that I was sitting by a pond, by a river, a creek near my house, and I saw a stone, and on the stone was something that looked like a camel, and looked like a camel and the sun. So a camel and the sun. And I looked at that, and I like tarot cards, and I do one particular deck, the Book of Thoth, and the camel is Gimel, which is associated with the high priestess, which is the manifestation of the divine feminine in probably its purest form.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun is clearly masculine. And that was a day or two before you were on my podcast. And what you are doing is trying to help people bring their masculine and feminine together. So this was like a very subtle version of kind of what you just described. So the abstractness really got me, but here you're doing it in a different way, is seeing symbols where not too many people are going to do it, on a rock in a creek, in a dollar bill that happened to be there, and seeing the one. And there's something about you and subtlety of symbols that is becoming clear in this coincidence of kind of with mine seeing you and you describing this, seeing how you think and how you've abstracted in a very practical way. That's what's so interesting to me, that you have become able to see symbols where other people will not see them. And that's your way of thinking. And I walked into that with seeing it on the rock in the creek, and now I've heard it again. So that's another coincidence that reveals something about how you think. Okay. So that, you want to comment on that, and then we'll go to the higher self.
Yeah, no. And I think also, like you said, and you talk about this in your book, how our environment, which there are two types of environment from the way I look at it, and it's the seen environment as well as the unseen environment. So our eyes can only perceive 3% of the light field around us, and 97% of it is we're not able to see, well, for the most part, unless we're really starting to open up our pineal gland and really truly see with God's eye, so to speak. And so when we talk about, especially like when, you've mentioned in your book that other people who've been studying this, they talk about the environment and how that plays a part and a role in all of this. And so I like to also add to that I think that environment involves the unseen and the seen environment. So within your unseen environment, you knew that I was going to be coming on your podcast. I had already been in your vicinity because we had been introduced through a mutual friend, Amalea. And she, through that, and knowing that I was going to be coming on your podcast, I think you may have created a reality that would allow for such a coincidence to appear to you, to show you, well, one, that you are creating your reality, and that you are also in tune with your reality. And the two kind of go hand in hand.
They do. And what I like about that is it involves both of us co-creating this thing.
Exactly.
And that's what I was trying to get to with the other coincidences with you, that one in particular. And it's now clearer that, yes, I was picking you up when I was sitting by that creek, the way you think. That's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
But I did. That's where, when you look at coincidences, and that's what I was trying to see about the ones we shared, is what does it mean about our relationship that these coincidences took place? And so that's the only can get an answer to that by asking the other person, which is what I did. And you gave me the wonderful answer of just enjoy the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And here we're talking about my tuning into you somehow at a level of abstraction about symbols that are key to you, somehow knowing you without having really known you very well. And that's you and me making that happen, to my way of thinking.
Yeah.
I played a role, you played a role. But you were in my field, is what you were saying. And I could pick that up.
Yeah.
This field, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This unseen field, I call it the psychosphere. I try to describe that in my book, Meaningful Coincidences, our mental atmosphere. And while people have a lot of fun imagining the expanding universe and how big it is, I think there's enough craziness here on Earth that my curiosity can continue to be fed by wondering about what is that? What's going on around here? So I think we have a mental atmosphere that our minds give information and energy into and take information and energy out. And you are in getting closer to my field. We each one have our own little fields around. And so that was starting to connect up. And so I could pick up a little something about you without knowing it. And our intuition, which you're very much involved with, is like a way that we can describe its intuition is too general. There's a lot of stuff going on in there. Could pick that up. The psychosphere has a lot of energy and information in it. We are sensitive to it, some of us more than others. In the psychosphere, there's a lot of stuff. Akashic records are probably in there. Maybe the ability to see the future and certainly to be able to remember the past. Maybe there are memories of past lives running around up in there that we can tune into. But let's just talk about a simple one called telepathy, or I'll do the one that I know about a lot, which is feeling the pain of a loved one at a distance. I was choking uncontrollably in San Francisco at 11 p.m. one night. And 3,000 miles away, my father was bleeding into his throat and dying, choking on his own blood. So I was feeling what he was feeling. And I had to find out if other people do that. And they do. It's not uncommon. You probably heard that many times.
I just had someone in my alchemy group a few weeks ago. She was getting all this tightness in her chest, and lo and behold, her husband ended up having like a heart attack. And she kept getting it over and over. And finally, she decided to get her husband to the hospital immediately, not knowing like what was going on. And then they found out, and like, yeah, it was a blessing that, she got him there in time, because had she not, it may have gone a lot differently for him. And so these feelings, these messages, the ability to tune into what someone else might be going through in moments of high stress, or possibly even really great joy, which is this is a stress. It's a positive stress, right? They play a specific role, I think, not just one role, but they play some specific roles in our reality.
Like what?
Well, for an SOS, perhaps,
Yeah,
right?
really. That's a main one, I think,
Yeah.
but it's an SOS. I have other stories like that too,
Hmm.
uh, where the person, same thing, same general idea, where you actually can do something. With my father, I couldn't do something. He was
Hmm.
3,000 miles away and I didn't know what it was. But
Yeah.
sometimes, as the person you described knew it was her husband. And I heard another one, same thing. She was feeling something and had to run home, and he was having a heart attack. Same thing. What else besides SOS?
Warning, not necessarily for an SOS reason, but just a warning of what's might be coming in.
Hmm.
Um, also, yeah, I guess a warning would also be kind of like a foresight, foreshadowing
Yeah.
of something to come to be. I recently had one of that happened to me a few weeks ago, where I all of a sudden got all this tightness and anxiety in my chest, and the person I was thinking about, I was like, well, why am I feeling this way about them? And I realized it was them. After I spoke to them a few days later, it was them feeling it around something that they had to tell me. And so it was, and I completely discounted it because it was making me worried, and I had no reason to be worried, given everything in my reality as I understood it. But so I think we are communicated with in different ways. And sometimes it's just like with anything, it's a form of communication that we have available to us, but we don't utilize it. And it could actually prove to be very beneficial and much more effective and efficient than the current communication methods we have.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to describe how I think that the diagram of how this works.
Hmm.
I call it simultacity, the feeling of the pain of a loved one at a distance, somebody you're close to.
Yep.
The research makes it clear that it's often a parent with a child, but it can be people who are close with each other too, friends. So a lot of it depends on the closeness of the connection. So let's hypothesize a higher self. And I'll have, since I like to do visual diagrams that are kinesthetic, so they're moving around, but it's have feel in it, but it's still pictures. Think of your higher self as a balloon in the psychosphere, and it's connected like a balloon to your mind. It's connected, and there's a communication between you and the higher self. The higher self has more perspective than you do. It's up there; they can see more stuff. Can
Your eagle eyes.
your eagle eyes?
Oh, I've never said that before. I love it though. Your higher self is your eagle eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Looking around.
Hmm.
And if you have a good connection with somebody, that eagle can also connect with that other higher self of the other person, because it's connected through the energy of the connection on the lower plane. So energy goes up, you have a dialogue with your higher self. Your higher self can have a dialogue with the higher self of somebody else who's
Hmm.
important to you. And then the other person's higher self can communicate down to that person, which is what happened to you when you started feeling some anxiety. That person was tuning you in. And you said, no, I don't want to. I don't want to feel that way. But it still came through.
Yes.
And then the circuit got closed when that person told you on the earth plane what was going on
Hmm.
with that person. What do you think of that?
I completely agree with you. And I 100% agree that is exactly what I think is happening. And I think it's a fantastic diagram that you just drew for my entire audience. And there's so much that happens through the higher self communication. Sometimes our higher selves meet up in dreams. Sometimes I've had dreams where I literally see my higher self and the other person's higher self having a communication, because the communication can't happen physically here on
Wow.
this plane. And
Wow.
working out certain things there, things that would help the other person or help me to understand things more. I also understand, like what you said, that I do believe that this person's higher self tuned into my higher self so that I could be aware of what was coming in, just because I choose to be aware. Now, sometimes that choice is an unconscious choice. Like we don't realize what we're choosing. But this is something, though, that I think is a way for us to receive that communication when the higher selves have been the delivery methods of the messenger. So basically, one higher self hands off a telegram, other higher self takes it, downloads it, and then you receive.
That's the idea. And I have two questions. One is how did you know it was the two higher selves talking in the dream? And the second question, I want just so you know it. Second question is this choice.
Mm.
I'll talk a little bit about that, because I don't think it's as subconscious only. I think it's you and me being willing to be open to a lot of what's called crazy. And it takes a lot to be able to hold a different view of reality than the people around you have.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting closed in by doing like 50 podcasts, not just my podcast. I'm doing 4 of those a month, and I've done 50 for my book, and there's more coming. I'm just talking about the same thing. I want to be able to keep expanding the way we're talking now, keep expanding my ability to be open to the weird stuff, because it's so much fun.
Yeah.
But you can only take so much of it. And
well, no, you do. Sometimes you just need to back off for a little bit. You're like, I just need a little bit of Earth vibes.
yeah.
I just need to vibe here on Earth with just, the simple 3D stuff, which is, I don't think there's anything wrong with 3D stuff. I know we give 3D a bad rap. Like, we were like, oh, that person's so 3D, or I'm just so tired of dealing with this 3D stuff. And I'm like, the 3D stuff, sometimes I welcome it. I'm like, good break from all that higher stuff that is just draining sometimes, not because I don't like it, but because it does require a lot of energy. And the more awareness you have, the more responsibility it requires. And so sometimes I don't want all the responsibility of the 5D stuff. I just want to hang out in 3D, just bliss. What is it called? Blissful ignorance, right? So, and I think it's okay to have breaks, like to have that. But when it comes to how did I know about the higher selves in the dream, there's a very, for me, and this is my experience, it may be different for other people, I'm sure it is. But in my experience, there is a certain lucidity and vividness of the dream that also brings in an element of me feeling like I'm watching. So I am not in my body experiencing it. Part of me is, but part of me is watching. And so I am literally watching my higher self and the other person's higher self.
So some other aspect of you is watching these two higher selves.
Yes.
Okay. Great. That I'm not going to quite get to there, but we have described too in the book the observing self, or the self-observer. We each have a self-observer that observes the contents of our own mind, and we get that more activated when we're meditating. But then when you start talking about your own self-observer, then you start having a second self-observer that's observing the first self-observer. But then you start getting into talking about what the second self-observer does. Then you have a third self-observer observing the second self-observer, while that self-observer's doing the first. Here, I want to see how you put what I just said together with who's watching of you, of the two higher selves, because I haven't really had that picture before of a self of yours, a observing self, observing these two higher selves, which makes this observing self that's observing these other two somehow more abstract or higher.
Well, Bernie, I think you're just complicating the whole thing.
You just did it.
No, so who is observing is my dreamtime self. So my dreamtime self is observing the higher self. Now, when I am having dreams, that I am not aware I am having a dream. To me, it is just me in the dream experiencing stuff. But this has an element of observation as well. And I don't usually have that in most of my dreams, where there's an element of me observing myself and someone else interacting in the dream. And that's how I understand those as, and one of the reasons why I can say it's the higher self is because of the way the two people are interacting with each other. So there seems to be a higher awareness, and choices are made from a higher perspective than what I know my 3D self would choose. And so this is how I understand it to be the higher self.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
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 Well, the picture didn't come as clearly as I would have liked, because probably the first time you've articulated this, I'm going to guess. Um, so because I like to get pictures
Mm-hmm.
from what you described. I was just doing this first, second, and third thing, and you have a dream time observer.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's lucid dreaming, is
Yeah.
what some people will call that,
Mm-hmm.
where you can manipulate the stuff that's going on in the dream. But this was a lucid dream observer, if we'll call it that, who could see and then report these two higher selves communicating with each other.
I will also say that I get a distinct feeling that I am being allowed to listen in on a conversation.
Ah. Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh,
Mm-hmm.
uh-huh.
There is that as well.
That's really cool, Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
They don't happen very often, but when they do, I know. Because it's distinctly different for me. But again, maybe for me it's because I'm so used to the subtleties. The subtleties are very normal to me to pick up on, but that's the way I see it.
Well, it is subtle.
Um, just to pause really second, because I know we're already at the hour. Do you need a hard stop right now, or do you want to go
Nope.
on for a few more minutes?
No, I don't need a hard stop.
Okay, we'll go on for maybe 10 more minutes.
Sure.
Okay. So with the higher self coming into play, of also communicating to us, not just in our waking life, but also in our dream life, which one could argue, who knows which one is which. What has been the most profound experience you've had with your higher self?
Um, this one was really a lot of fun. I was by this time by our local river, the Ravenna River. I loved going swimming in there in the summer, and it was getting toward the end of summer, and I had my bathing suit on, and had my shirt over my back, and it started to and I was up a little pathway, sitting on what I called my throne. It was a little mossy kind of thing. And I was talking to the trees there, which I have a little predisposition to do. And they were calling me your high ass to me. They like doing that to me because I get a little inflated. So I heard some thunder, and I said, should I go back to the parking lot, which would be taking a right when I came out of that little path I was on and going on the big path, or should I take a left? So I didn't know. So I heard a voice say, "Go left." It was distinct, and people do hear distinct voices, and it doesn't mean you're crazy. It means somebody's talking to you. Hey, you talking to me, kind of thing.
So you heard it with your actual ears?
I heard it as if I had actual ears, but it didn't go through my ears. It
Okay.
went directly. It's the way I want to communicate with people in
Yes,
the
yes,
future.
yes. That's okay. Because I hear the same things. Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's just, but yeah, it was just like I had. Okay, you understand.
Mhm.
So I, being the kind of a rebel that I tend to be here, because it's what I like to do, I said to the higher voice, to this higher self speaking to me, I said, why? So this voice said, you'll see. I said, okay. So I went out and took a left, and I started hearing some music. and they're playing or starting to play was a singer guitar player that I had been wanting to see perform, but hadn't, because there was a little outdoor venue where this concert was starting. So I said, wow, I got to see her doing her moves, and she really had some really fun watching her. I said, I want to go in. So I walked around to say, can I have a ticket? And they said, no, they're all sold. And remember, I had my shirt over my, and I was barefoot too. I was carrying my shoes. I think I was carrying my shoes. So I went back and stood by a fence that's just ropes and watched from there and listened from there. So I see some woman come over to me. She says, I hear you need a ticket. I said, yeah. The person over there told me that you want to get in here. I said, I have an extra ticket. Come on in. So I went through the ropes and made a beeline for this guy standing there. And he and I got into this great conversation. We were really having a lot of fun. And she comes over and says, that's my husband. Do you know him? No, I didn't know him, but just found him. That's what we call internal GPS. Some people call it that. You just know where you got to be without knowing how you got there. So I got there, and we're having a great time. So we yap. She tells me later that she was a little suspicious of giving me the ticket because I look like one of the guys who sleeps under the bridge down the pathway a little bit. A hobo, she called me. Well, she was a little surprised to find out that I was a psychiatrist, wrote a book about coincidences, and we decided we're going to have dinner together. So we go out to dinner a week or so later, and each of them independently comes up with the idea of throwing a book party for me in Charlottesville, because my book was going to be out in a week or two. And I've been trying to figure out, can I have a book party? Hey, I want to have a book party in Charlottesville. I don't want to be just not have something here. That's what people do. So they invited me to have a book party for me, and it was really fun. And there are other things that I won't mention here, but that I found out about them and that they found out about me that made us even closer. So I'm going to their New Year's Eve party, and I'm going to do a little business with them on Saturday, and they become friends of mine and introduce me to people in Charlottesville. That was like a, you'll see, said the voice.
Yes.
And I keep like trying to tell them I'm seeing. I tell this couple what I'm seeing. So that,
well, I think questioning the voice is almost the funniest part about the whole thing, is like, we were like, but why? And it's like, don't question why. That's the whole point. That's part of faith. You have to have trust. You have to have trust in the whole thing working. It's funny because just this morning, as I was heading to the gym, I got up super early. I was like, okay, I left the house before 6 a.m. And I was just going there to do a little bit of cardio, get the blood flowing. And there are two different ways I can drive into the gym parking lot. And there's a way that I usually take, and then there's a way that I almost never take. And I was getting ready to take my usual way. And all of a sudden I understood I was supposed to go straight, not turn right.
How did you understand this one?
Because I got this sense of, you don't want to go right. You want to go straight. And I was like, well, really? It's just, that's the way I always go though. And then I saw a parking spot that was going to be easily available to me if I went in the other way. I saw it in my mind. And so I was like, okay, we'll see. And so I drove straight. I went in the opposite way I usually go. And sure enough, right there out in front was a spot that would have been very difficult for me to turn into had I come in the other way, but super easy for me to get into right away with the way I went in. So I was like, oh, cool. Thanks.
Well, I hope you learned from the time you told me that you had the intuition to turn earlier when you were going someplace.
Yes.
And you didn't, then you got stuck behind a truck.
I know. And I said, I had this conversation with myself this morning in the car as I'm driving. Nicole, you just got it. Start listening, like stop challenging it. Just keep going, because the more you keep going with it, the more it's going to happen and the more it's going to benefit you. So yeah, no, I made sure I listened this time.
Well, you and I may have a little different perspective on the why. The movie Fiddler on the Roof had the main protagonist Tevye standing on the roof saying, "Why, God, why?" So I got used to being able to ask. I wasn't a nasty ask that when I did it, because it was a friendly thing, but I just wanted more information. And they gave me more information. You'll see. I mean, what a wonderful response that was.
Yeah.
And I think that was, again, my eagle eye, my higher self, just like with yours and the two parking and driving things, being able to see more than you could see down here. And it's like up periscope. That's the periscope for you.
Yeah.
I went down here, and that's to be able to listen to that. So you and I may have different styles about asking why. And I've had enough of this stuff happening that having a very clear voice saying go left, wait a minute. I didn't ask who are you, which is another question I could have said, like Alice, like the caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland. I didn't
Yeah.
do that. That's a good question, though. I mean, I should have. Who you talking to me? Who? Yeah, I could have done that one. Uh, so we have a little different styles, but the important thing for our viewers and our listeners is to know that you can have intuitions about what to do, and you have to test them out. So, and you tested it out by not listening one time, and so you're going to listen another time, and you can see that. And then, what nice thing about your parking thing is that you got an image of that parking spot. That's wonderful. So that, as in a way, you said why, and they gave you an answer.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, okay, we'll see. We'll see what happens, like, and but here's the thing too that I think is so important for everyone to understand when it comes to, because so much of my audience is interested in developing their intuition so that it's stronger and stronger, so that this can be something that they can rely on, which is like the inner GPS, right? The internal GPS system of your higher self, your intuition. The more you lean into that unknown, the more you say yes to it, the stronger it will get. It doesn't matter if sometimes it's wrong in the way that you perceive it's wrong. Because I have to say, just because the outcome that you thought you were getting when you followed your intuition didn't happen doesn't mean your intuition wasn't right. There might be another thing behind that that you needed to find out. So that's why it's so important to continuously say yes, lean in, trust, follow. The more you do, the more the stronger it gets. And I can verify that through my own experience, because I know how hard it is to trust and lean in and say yes. But it's one of the fastest ways to develop your intuition.
It is. It is. And the thing that not working out, I mean, I've had feelings of doing something, and man, was that a big problem then, for which I'm grateful. I mean, it's happened a couple of times. So you have to have the belief that you're going to find a way out of the problem you just caused yourself. It's really important, rather than saying giving up or I'm not going to listen to my intuition anymore. You have to believe there's a way out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's always a way out. If there was a way in, there's always a way out.
Oh, that's good.
Right? So it was such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Let my audience know where they can find your book and also your podcast, anything else you've got going on.
Hold up the book. I like the picture of you holding it up.
All right.
And if no, you need your face in there too. So yeah, that's good. That's good. Meaningful coincidences: how and why synchronicity and serendipity happen. You can get any place books are sold on the internet. That's my name down there. Thank you. Bernard Beitman. But I encourage people to go to their bricks and mortars bookstores and buying them there instead of the ones online. But the online ones work very well. So if I've started the Coincidence Project, which is now we got a little donation just showing up the other day, and I'm looking for more. We're incorporated as a nonprofit in the state of Virginia, and we're trying to do what you and I are doing here, is encourage people to think about coincidences, which means sharpening your intuition, believing they can be useful, just the way we're talking about, and get the coincidence idea out there, because I am very concerned, as I try to describe it in the last part of the book, about humanity destroying our nest, Earth. And rather than thinking about outer space and how big the universe is, I'd rather say we need to get along with each other better and we need to find our purpose in life. And coincidences help show us how we're connected with each other and can help us find out what we're doing here in a way that might help us join together and do something about what we're doing to the planet and to each other.
I agree. I completely agree with you. How beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, I will leave all the links to everything that you've discussed and your podcast, which is available across all the podcast platforms and on YouTube.
It's on
correct?
YouTube and available on a lot of podcasts,
Okay.
most of them.
So
The audio.
yeah.
And I have a Psychology Today blog that is the one I put the Psychiatrist Challenge official reality thing. And so there's a lot of stuff in there too. One of the fun things about coincidence we didn't touch on much today, but is the part they play in romance. That's a very big, popular subject, the most popular of any of the posts that I've put out there.
I can't imagine why.
You can't imagine why, but try. You got a good imagination.
I mean, when we're talking about coincidences connecting us, and then we're talking about romantic connections, yeah, I would think so.
You would think so. The funny thing about that is that I've heard stories of wonderful coincidences bringing people together, but then they rely on the fact that the coincidences brought them together and don't work on their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The coincidence just started, but
Yeah.
you got to work on it. You got to work on the regular stuff.
You got to keep the fire flamed.
You got to keep it flamed, and you got to be nice to each other and recognize the other person's emotions and thoughts and respond to that instead of just your own.
Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This is a really fun conversation we had today. I know the audience is just going to love this one. And guys, please, if you're interested, please go out and grab Bernie's book, Meaningful Coincidences. You'll really enjoy it. In fact, I think it's a really great book to even give someone who's just on the border of starting to really contemplate, is it possible? Is it possible that not all acts are random and that there is something greater orchestrating all of this, which would include all of us in that equation? So please go out and grab this book if you're interested and check out his podcast, Connecting with Coincidences. It is available on YouTube, of course, and all other podcast platforms. Bernie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure to connect with you once again, and I'm glad we got to share a few more coincidences together. And to my audience, if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review on Spotify or an Apple to help boost the show's well, what do I want to say here? What's the word I'm looking for, Bernie? Not appearance, but like so other people can find us. I just lost the word.
Visibility.
Visibility. There you go. The eagle eye. Help people get their eagle eyes on the podcast. So if you haven't supported the podcast in that way, I would greatly appreciate that. Of course, remember to share this episode with anyone who you think may benefit from it. And I love you guys dearly. I will see you next time. Thanks again for joining me for another show on the Enlighten Up podcast. I love you guys so much for all of your continued support. So remember to raise your vibe, find your tribe, and be open to the infinite possibilities held in the mysteries that surround us all. Thanks again for sharing the show with your family and friends. And if you're new to the show and you need to find out more information about me, please head on over to my website, NicoleFrolick.com, where you can join my newsletter. And please follow me on Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Keep your light bright, and I'll see you next week.